All right, so here we are. And I'm going to thank everybody again for coming. And my goal today is not to cry, because it's just an emotional time, isn't it? Leading up to this event, even before all of this craziness happened, I was going through this emotionally turbulent transition in my life. And I'm not an emotional person, which I know is not good. So I've really been awakening to that part of me. As much as I channel about it and bring it into my courses, for me it's somewhat uncomfortable and foreign to really go into the depths of emotion. But that's, I guess, where I want to take this today is wind back around to that point and why I think it's so important at this time that we're reviewing our lives and letting those emotions go, because I sense that we're at this turning point where masculine and feminine are really meant to come back into balance, where it's all meant to click, and we're supposed to realize why we're here, but especially who we are. So lately I've been playing with a lot of childhood memories, again, which is really weird and foreign to me, because I know a lot of you might be similar. I have a terrible memory. I felt guilty with my own kids. Just the past is so weird. It just seems like it never happened. And, I've wondered why, and I've contemplated that, and I've had sessions about it, where people have come to me and said, the more I awaken, the less I remember. And so there's a technical reason to this that the guides are really good at explaining, and it is vibrational speed. So the things that we created in our past, the timelines we were on, the experiences that we had, we're in a slower speed of vibration, which isn't bad. Everyone's like, yeah, it was so bad. It's not bad. It's just different. It's just where we were. It's a different dimension, different consciousness. And we've done so much work and we've awakened ourselves that we're just vibrating at a higher speed. So there has to be a connection. It's kind of like that electromagnetic signal, those charges that go through the body. Like if there's something's blocking them, the communication signals completely break down. So right now, I think we're coming to this point where our past and where we stand today is starting to communicate. And for me, it's shown up in childhood stories where I've been sitting back and just thinking, wow, that was crazy time in my, like, whatever led me to do that? And what was that about? And then, coming to some really simplistic understandings. So one of the things I want to get out of the way before I launch into this story is, we're all here, family, close family, and this is a very difficult event because it concerns me that maybe we won't be together in physical for a short while. And one of the messages the guides brought through in a recent session I was doing went really deep into this idea of the high heart. And what's the high heart? It's a complex, it's a matrix, it's a field. So many of you may have studied the story of Krishna or know that his heart was looked at as a technology. Literally to be in Krishna's presence would alter your consciousness and reality just by being in that close proximity. And, so many ascended masters, all of you guys who are here, that high heart complex in connection with other humans doesn't matter that you're doing anything specific, that you're working with crystals or you're talking about the physical body or you're bringing in Christ consciousness. Your high heart, your presence that you're activating within is literally connecting a field. And it's how unity consciousness fell apart because we don't know ourselves to that degree, that we've activated this part where regardless of what we think people see us as or what our past entailed, we're healing each other, we're like bringing each other into this zone. So that's my concern. And that's why I might get a little weepy up here, because I think that this may be what's suppressing us right now. Yeah, it looks really physical and linear and regulations and laws and politics, but I think it's a consciousness. And I think it knows exactly what it's doing, and it's very intelligent. And it works through our past. works through these past ideas about ourselves. So this is a story I'm going to tell. I might have told it before. I can't even remember. Yeah, in the last 7-8 years, I don't know. But everyone has that story that mom tells at breakfast. Whenever you say it, like the funny one that everyone laughs at you about, right? So this is mine. This is my funny story. Is when I was in 5th grade, so I was like 10, 11. There was a gym teacher, and typical gym teacher, sports guy. And I'll just say it because I'm an adult now. Didn't see this as a child. He's a real male chauvinist pig. Like that. I mean, there's no better way to say it. He's just a. So anyway, he would separate the women and the girls and the boys. And I was a softball player, so 2nd grade, firstborn. My dad taught me not to throw like a girl, how to throw like a boy. I was a shortstop. I played left field. I played second base. It was totally my thing. Loved it. So I'm going to call him Mr. G. So Mr. G, softball time comes around, and he lines up the girls and the boys in 2 separate lines. And he sends the boys out to the diamond, the real diamond with dirt and bases and a batting cage and a real ball and a real bat. And he sends the girls all the way to the grass with frisbees for bases, a wiffle ball, and a wiffle bat. And I'm thinking, surely he's going to give us a turn, switch us out. Next week rolls around, sends the girls out to the grass. Boys get the real diamond, the real bases. And I'm like really shocked because I play softball. Like I know how to do, I can use a bat. Dad taught me how to throw like a boy, I'm awesome at this. And I'm looking at the girls. Okay, so the girls, they're on teams that I'm playing against. So I'm like, you guys all know how to play softball too. And are we here to learn this? So my internal activist called everybody around. And, it's just who I am to be in this role. And I said, this isn't right. Mr. G isn't letting us play on the real diamond, and we know how to do this. And so what are we going to do? What are we going to do about it? And all the girls were a little afraid because the guy was pretty intimidating, And I said, well, here's the thing. I'm going to think this through. And if you guys stand behind me, I will do all the talking, and I will figure out a plan. And they were cool with that. They're like, we'll stand behind you, whatever you want to do, right? So I go home, and over the next week, my mind is spiraling about, what am I going to do? So first, I'm thinking through all the logical reasons why I should be on that baseball diamond and how, he should totally understand this. Going through it in my head, I'm practicing it. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I don't think I was mad. I don't remember being angry. I just remember being in this zone where I was like, this has to be done. This just has to be done. It just has to be accomplished. The future of, all of the rest of the grades and the women depend upon this, thing happening. So I planned it out in my head, so Mr. G would line us up in these 2 separate lines at the end of class, and he would say, girls can go back first, and then the boys. So I thought, when he lines us up, I'm just going to say we're not going to go back. We need to talk. And so at 10 years old, I made sure I was at the front of the line, and he lines us up, and he says, girls can go first. And I said, we're not going anywhere. We need to talk. So this gym teacher with a shocked look on his face is like, all right, boys can go back to class. So he gets in a chair, somewhat like this, high chair. We all sat below, and I stood in front of him, kind of looking behind me like, did they really stand behind me? Because I didn't know at this point were the girls really going to have the guts to stay, but they all did. They all stayed. And I stood up in front of Mr. G and went through every single reason very calmly as to why this should happen. Not expecting at all any conflict or dissonance, argumentativeness. I just felt like it was going to work. And it did. He was like, you know what? You're totally right. And next week, the girls get to go on the diamond. So he walked us back to class, and of course the teacher called me to her desk and said, I heard what happened. Just so you know, next time you call me. And then I got home and my mom said, got a little call from the principal. Understand something happened in gym class, but I didn't get in trouble. There were no consequences. I didn't get, detained from school. And I was sitting here thinking how beautifully and easily that went. Like my 10, 11-year-old self was, number one, like so innocent and so untainted by the world, but also just so determined and so centered and so in what I believed in that it couldn't have gone wrong. Like it just couldn't have gone wrong. And then I was thinking about how, as an adult, with what's happening in the world, especially with what happened with us recently, I get into the mind play of judgment and what could happen, and how are we going to stand in this belief it's never going to work? And I was just observing myself, like, wow, like where does that come from? What happened between 10, 11 years old and 52 that's put me in this position where I suppress myself so much. Like what I believe in is so complicated and hard to achieve in the world. Like, why can't I find that 11, 10-year-old again? So this is my thought process kind of going in to some recent editing. And well, actually, I was going into this event and I'm always prepared. I have this big list of things, messages that have come through. I'm like going to talk about this and that. My mind was a complete blank because I'm looking at what I've shared, what I've written, and I'm like, man, with what's happening on the planet, the guys have said it all. Like if you've been following my messages, the structure, the energy, the situation we're in has been explained in so many different ways. But I was saying there's this one missing piece. It's got to be simpler than that. That's a nice, complicated, explanation. And there's so many people right now that are reporting on the energies, and oh my gosh, I appreciate them because the energies are just like if you're reporting on the energies right now, it's just like, whew, whew, whew. But I'm like, where's that line where we don't have that intense up and down? What is that? What's missing in us? And I thought, it's combining that knowing who we are with the emotion, right? And getting a handle on that. So what I ended up reading was a chapter in my recent book entitled Know Thyself. And I know you guys probably all know, this know thyself concept. It dates back to Egypt. I think it was Apollo's temple or something it was carved on, and there's a whole, all the kinds of writings on it. But I really think that right now, well, in general, okay, this is why we're here, to know thyself. So if you take that a step further, what does that truly mean? It means that we are interacting with the outer world, with experiences and challenges and people and, all these difficult things to better know thyself. So instead of knowing what's going on in the world and how everything's, cranking along and who's responsible, and that can make us insane. My gosh, the guides have said over and over, this was going to be a chaotic time where things were going to make sense, right? Look at the election in the United States, right? It's exactly what they told us was going to happen. Nothing makes sense. The numbers don't add up. And when they do add up, guess what? They don't add up. And then when they add up, everything's recanted again. That's an imploding structure. So the best thing that we can do at this time is to know thyself. Because when we get into that space, that high heart complex is going to carry us exactly where we need to be, to interact with whoever we need to interact with, and to share and do whatever we're meant to do. So we have to get somewhat out of the mind in order to do this, and that's really what this chapter was talking about. It's about how there's a reptilian genetic and part of our mind that's actually really beneficial. It's important for us to know fear because there's an electromagnetic signal that runs through our bodies that literally shapeshifts us into superheroes. If we have to run from an impending danger, that fear is our best friend because there's an automatic shift that goes on that takes us from where we are in the moment to safety. But the problem is that reptilian part of us has been turned on and doesn't know how to turn off. And the missing link is empathy. Those of you who've been reading the chapters of my book know that it's really focused on the whole story, reptilians and where they come from and, all of this stuff. And I don't like to get too wound around it. The book carries it into a really higher space where we understand it's not separate of us, even though there is a story behind it. But these reptilians, their mind is so advanced that they don't need emotion. They shape-shift like that. They're shapeshifters. So they can time travel and shape-shift, and they don't need a mechanism like a nervous system. They don't need a mechanism like, an emotional body, because it just slows them down. They're not here to experience that, but we are. We're here to experience that. And so the more we can get into that space of empathy and emotion, first for ourselves and our own human story, that's when those connections start firing the way that they're supposed to. And that's where that 11-year-old self, I think, walked into Mr. G's class and was very calmly, not pointing fingers, but saying, we need to talk. And he heard me. He had no qualms about hearing me out. He could have sent me straight to the principal's office. He could have, banned me from school. He could have made me do push-ups in the corner. He didn't. He literally sat and heard me out. And I think that's because I was in such a flow with my thought process, with empathy and emotion. It was all coming together perfectly. And I saw it coming together right before my eyes as a young child. And this is what I think we're here to do. This is what I think we're here to do. So I myself learned a valuable lesson recently about the people out there who are trying to do things to the good people in here or wherever they may be. And it was Master Jesus himself that came in recently. And we all know they know not what they do. They know not what they do. But what is that really? They know not what they do. So it's a disconnection from self. It's not because they didn't know him or the way or a specific religious teaching that he was trying to indoctrinate them in. It was because they didn't know themselves. They were acting out of an energy that wasn't aligned. And so this is the bigger picture that I'm understanding and I'm attempting to work with in my life. It's not easy. It's not easy. Because we want to call everybody out and say, why? Why would you do this? Can't you see? Can't you see? We want to look at how mean they are and how wrong they are, and we want to indoctrinate them into our way. But that's just making it worse. That's just making it worse. And we can't know them. We can't know them. They can know themselves. And when they know themselves and we know ourselves, we meet in this field where, like Mr. G and I had this amazing talk, like two adults, about the baseball field. And it all worked out. And the next week he put us on a diamond. And the girls were like, yes. And I got my egoic moment for a little while, which was, par for the course. But that aside, I think that's what's happening right now. There's a childhood part of us. There's an inner part of us that we need to connect to. It's a more innocent part of us that doesn't look at people through adult eyes and what we've learned along the way, and the right and the wrong and the judgment and all of that stuff. So we have time for one more story and then I'll channel. I'm out of teaching, so I'm just going to share my personal story. I posted this one on Facebook actually the other day, so I don't know how many people read it, but I'm going to tell it again because it was just I don't know. Again, I'm viewing through this hologram my life, and I was looking at media, social media. Oh my gosh, what a disaster, right? All forms of media, not all. There's some good people out there. just like the voting, you know, it's like facts, and oh, that fact is wrong, and the number's wrong. Oh, this is right, and you're like, what? Where do I go? You know, for me, it's really personal when I look at alternative and mainstream media, because my goal in life as a child was to become a reporter. I looked at reporters as superheroes. That was my, you know, some people want to be a doctor when they grow up. Some people want to be an engineer. I wanted to be a reporter. I just loved that idea. And I went to college and finally decided to get the journalism major so I could go out in the world and be this investigative reporter on the scene, you know, and went through all of the, you know, classes. And I got to my senior year and I had this professor who stood in front of the class one day and was like, listen, you guys better be prepared because reporting isn't easy. The life of an investigative reporter is really hard. You'll probably end up at a local news desk, sitting in the corner. You won't make enough to feed your family. And you will be working 14 hours a day. And guess what? You'll be on call. Middle of the night, something's going down. They're going to call you. You're going to have to get up and go. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I want to make money and be comfortable, and I want hours, you know. So I literally bailed in my senior year. I took all of my journalism credits and I put them into public relations, which was a softer kind of way and a more, you know, concrete way to earn money in the world. And all of that came flooding back on me today because ethics was like the number one thing. Every single journalism class I took, ethics. And I would turn in a paper and think I had no personal opinion involved in what I just wrote whatsoever. You know, it was like the who, what, when, where, why, how, facts, research. And I would get it back and they would show me a tone. Like, that needs to come out. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. So I'm always amazed today when the little news that I watch, I see a reporter who's just spouting personal like opinion, and I'm like, wait a second, that's not right. But I went back to this professor and I was thinking about how he must have loved journalism and how he saw ethics in the world, because he put us all on notice. He saw it as his role to weed out the weak at heart. And at that time I was like, oh, I don't want that. I don't want that. But it was good. It was good that I didn't choose that path, because I see now the way I was meant to use all of my journalism background. But as I was looking back on this and thinking about it the other day, I was thinking, yeah, it's just like this timeline. You know, that professor who was weeding out the weak of heart. You know, like, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. You might not know where your next meal is going to come from. You might have to wake up in the middle of the night and get to work. And I'm a different human now than I was in college. And here we are, you know, here we are. This timeline is saying, are you the weak of heart? You know thyself, but are you going to stand in that self when stuff goes down? And so all of this came crashing down on me the other day, and I thought, man, this is just an awakening for me personally, of coming back to knowing thyself and standing in that self. No matter how hard it gets, no matter what happens, no matter who pulls the rug out from underneath me, right? My path isn't the path for everyone. We all have that path. We're all going to influence it differently. But that's what I think that leveling out comes from. It's where we're walking. It's where we don't stand in the intensity of it or the low place where we're defeated, but it's where we stand straight in the center and go, how are we here to serve? How are we here to serve? Thoughts, questions, ideas? So for me, I'll conclude by saying this emotional uprising is like a cleansing. You know, it's just moving all of that stuff out of the way so those connections can fire. It's looking back on the decisions that I made, not as a mistake, but as a lesson. It's gaining really valuable tools and information for me. And that's where I think we'll all stand over the next coming months together. All right, so let's channel. So I know you guys in the room, you guys are all family. You guys have been here, you know what's happening. I don't have to explain all of that. So we're going to bring in a general message for everyone in the room and out there in YouTube land that I know will land at the exact perfect time for what everyone's going through and what everyone needs to hear. And then we'll take questions. And so we don't have the benefit of a live stream today, which is awesome for you guys. If you have burning questions, this is the time. This is your private, opportunity to get them answered. And then Ethan's always full of questions if we run out, I know. So we'll rely on him. He usually asks the best ones, So there's a time early on in my channeling when he was the only one asking the questions. And those are really some of my best videos ever. If you go back to the archives where, he was asking the question. Okay. So we'll just sit in the energy of this. If it goes above and beyond your conscious knowing or ability to keep up, that's okay. Just absorb the vibration of it. Since we might get some kind of activation today, meditation, we'll let that flow. Perfect and divine time and way. Okay, we're going to work with the council first. I welcome them. We are the Council of Light. And we are multiple ascended masters and ancient teachers from days gone by. We often refer to ourselves as galactic beings, but we know that you who are here understand there is no differentiation between a galactic being and an earthly being, for we have spent many lifetimes in different bodies and in different experiences sharing not only the revelations of our past journeys, but also experiences from our star systems and our cosmic families. We look at you as also doing the same. So there is no separation between this council that is speaking now and those who are here, who have come to interact lovingly with our truth. We bring together not only the realization of your embodiment as a true sovereign soul, but also a higher perspective than what your earthly soul has been able to capture. And we blend them together in such a way that a sonic resonance takes over. And within each and every one of you, that vibration continues on from this moment. It surges through the unique blueprint that you have all brought to the planet and coincides it with a collective energy that's ever present and meant to be shared. And we come today to acknowledge that this is a time of great uncovering, whereby so many are expressing their truth that they may be missing out on a very valuable aspect of the timeline they find themselves in, which is not that which can be found in the outer world, in the physical plane, but that which already lies within and has been dormant, not through your wrongdoing, but because it was not relevant to where you stand today. There's an alchemy of readiness that is always taking place beneath the surface of your conscious mind. And it may be felt in a way that is quite uncomfortable and imbalanced. But it was always meant to be there in a way that carried you through time. Not to see in the outer world, to realize that which was untrue, but to validate all within you that desires to evolve, that knows your truth could never be permanent, and that the truth of every other soul on the planet must also evolve. So this concept of truth is what we come to speak to today, because we see it not as something that can be measured or validated by science or even ancient teachings. Because as we look at what we have come to teach through time, it has always changed. It's always adapted to the beings that we would meet. So even universal law itself and ancient teachings that many study today arrive to your doorstep in a quantum state. And you may believe that you are in possession of a biblical account or an ancient account of some experience. But even in a biblical account, words on a page within a physical book, there is vibration. And all of those words are in a quantum state the second you choose to interact with them. And this is why the Bible today can be read by multiple humans and interpreted very differently. It is not because those interpretations must take some egoic path, although they certainly do at times. It is because every word on that page is a vibrational signal that you are decoding based on your inner truth at the moment that you intersect with it. And this is why there are some who may revisit biblical stories later in life in their linear journey and receive new insights and understandings than they had previously, than they have been taught. It is not because what was known before was wrong. It is because it was interpreted through your vibration. But now, as we look out upon you, we see different humans and souls in similar bodysuits, catapulting their timeline forward, not because they've come to know things, but because they have come to understand and know themselves. And in that constant knowing, there will be constant change. And in everything that you interact with, there will be new realizations. And that is the excitement that we want to instill upon you. That truth is an ever unfolding quest. That as a soul, you arrived with great anticipation to experience. And if that ever unfolding quest was not present, there would be no reason for you to embody as a soul on the earth plane. Even in other dimensions, although this may be explained and understood differently, that eternal quest goes on. So in the need to know, in the need to understand, and in the need to share that understanding with others, there is a deep neglect for a part of you that first must be understood and, like the petals of the rose, unfold, fall to the ground, and rebloom. And if that is where your focus lies, everything around you in a quantum state will meet you at every perfect turn. Within every experience, you are co-creating with others vibrationally. And so to go into the pilgrimage and the quest of your eternal truth, and in one time period of your life, uncover it all, would not be to the satisfaction of your higher angelic self. Because in the uncovering of that truth, there would be no longer a need to interact here. As we wind in the idea of service, it's very important to note that service is not only a reflection of something produced in the outer world that comes to a final fruition and can be placed into the hands or the energy field of another. The first moment you conceptualize anything that a human would utilize as a tool for their own ascension, you had already put energy in motion. And that energy today is serving regardless of your ability to finish the project. This is the truth of who you are. And as we come together now, we hold space for all of you going through new transitions and new experiences of the self that are only and potently here to upgrade your reality. And we're pleased to take questions where you may have them.
I just wanted to make a comment about the council. First, when you were discussing it, you were really a very beautiful gold color. So apparently that's councils. Towards the end, when the council was talking, it turned into love for everyone. And at the very end, it was such a beautiful green of a healing color. And I felt every one of them. And it was so beautiful that I just had to share that.
Hello. On the profound subject of truth and service, coming from our physical, earthbound perspective, how do we interact with others? You know, how do we approach interacting with others, sharing truth, like capital T truth? You know, when everyone's sort of on different vibrational pages, and if you're called to, if one of your missions or divine earthworks are to share and spread capital T truth, could you speak on how to proceed?
Yes, absolutely. So we have Mary Magdalene stepping in. As a part of my assignment, I knew that I would walk a very difficult journey. I was not told exactly how it would unfold and in what time it would take place, but I was prepared in full, not with a roadmap and complete details, but to know that any doubt that I had at any time in the process was signaling me within. And the reason that I bring this forward today is because in expressing truth and in sharing a message, what we often notice is there is a part of your inner chemistry that begins to already anticipate the difference between yourself and another. And the message itself becomes altered, not because it is untrue or not a capital T truth, as you have brought to our attention, but because there is a part of you that is already anticipating its invalidation. And this is something that goes deep within the inner teachings of my younger years, where if we were to limit our perspective of how we would be met in the outer world, or catalyze any judgment in such a concrete way that it would put us in a certain light, our truest identity could not be found. So it is less about the truth that you are sharing, even if it is meant to be shared by you, and more about the identity that truth comes through. So in today's modern world, your identity has been looked at in a very linear fashion. You see yourself as separate of other humans and in conflict with beliefs and truths. But one of the most valuable teachings that came to us from ancient masters through time was that in order to accomplish what they were here to do, they could see no difference between themselves and another. And where this becomes difficult to accept is when you are met with discord. When you are met with someone who is implicating your worth through some invalidation of what you say. But it is often that there is a part of you that matches that frequency. And we don't bring this teaching forward for you to further invalidate or judge yourself. Because with the compassion of mothering eyes, we see all of you having arrived in one of the most challenging timelines that we also have similarly experienced. And it is through the vibration of healing that we were taught our inner road and way we see ourselves has everything to do with the healing journey and path of another. And sometimes that conflict is meant to be had, not because it must be met with conflict itself, but because it is calling you to a higher perspective than what is available in your inner identification. Conflict is offering us the opportunity to love more, to see ourselves through the most precious and angelic eyes. Because if we are able to see ourselves in this way, it matters not what the outer world thinks about the truth that we share. It comes through in a crystalline state where even if it aggravates another, it is only the transition of dense energy that is experienced. In the deep emotion that is shared, anger, for example, or fear, the personal revelation that it is an attack is only minimizing the vibrational difference that you have already made. So Master Jesus himself could walk on the earth plane and stand within the judgment of many others because he knew that that judgment was not personal to him. It was an uprising. It was a clearing of dense emotional frequency that held them back from the understanding not of his idea of what was meant to be shared and taught, but from the organic truth that all of them brought to the planet as a representation of Holy Spirit. So you are that Holy Spirit. And in the physical realm, we know that sometimes it is important to draw healthy and important boundaries between you and those who cannot control the lack of love that they feel within. But it is only this lack of love within yourself that doesn't lead you to drawing the most appropriate and loving boundaries. You today find yourselves in one of the most challenging circumstances, as if it is most important to speak your truth, when the embodiment of that truth is far more important. And that is not just a physical path alone. It's an alchemy of non-physical and physical as one. And it is masculine and feminine in perfect balance.
Hi, and thank you for being here. I have a question with regards to timelines, and I had an acute awareness of timeline convergence and timeline splits as I was making my way here, and it was very disorienting. So my question has to do with that, and more like, how can we navigate that type of chaos amongst the other chaos that we are presently in? Thank you.
Excellent question. This is the Pleiadian Collective, and they're very pleased to answer. We'll start by saying that two separate timelines are not collectively meant to be experienced for long periods of time. It is only when you are transitioning an entire planet, an entire race, from one dimension to another, that timeline splits ensue. This is purposeful because it's somewhat of an organizational process that's going on. And we know that you understand the measurement of vibration. It has somewhat been taught to you in a limited light, where lower vibration is equal to those that are not living in the way that you do. And this is not at all the case. Vibration is a speed, and it enables you to tap into information of the self. So we want to weave in the difference between a timeline split that is taking place collectively and a timeline collision. Timeline collisions take place constantly and are meant to be a part of your experience, both as a soul and as part of the human race. There's an internal technology that includes multiple aspects of who you are. And we will name some of them. They include the oversoul, which is a universal aspect of who you are. The higher self, which is an earthly container through which you view your experience. The soul, which is a more personal container. And your light body, which is meant to work in concert with physical. Your DNA is intricately connected to all of these different aspects. And what begins to take place is parts of you from other timelines arrive perfectly and in the right time to support your journey. This is a constant evolutionary process. But what's taking place right now is that you have opened so many doors, internal gateways, to ensure that your inner technology is coming back online, that soul fragments that were meant to come long ago are now surging forward in mass. So on a personal scale, you are reuniting with past timelines and parts of yourself that you were always meant to know, not from an intelligent standpoint, but from an energetic experience, or we'll say coalescing. That in itself can be quite difficult. And there are souls, many of you who are here today, that have planned very significant soul collisions. Timelines coming from multiple sectors of your linear lifetimes in the past that are meant to coincide. We call these very significant or purposeful lives, not because they are more important in the grand scheme of things, but because they are most needed. And we see so many at this time who are experiencing this personally, where parts of you that you had planned long ago to come back and reunite because a calling from the outer world required them are showing up. Now, to make this even more complex, collectives experience collisions as well. And this is an Akashic part of what you are currently going through. There are timelines in multiple dimensions that have existed on the earth plane before. Some of those you know from past history and you were taught as a child, and other ones you may not even be aware of. But on the spiral continuum, they are meant to come back around. They are valuable, energetic experiences, often because great leaps in consciousness have been made simply by their unfolding. But there is an aspect of completion when timelines come back around, meaning that there's something in the experience that didn't come to a completion point, whereby even if awakening happened, the physical plane did not see the result of that awakening. So we'll give you a very simplistic example. Wartime, being very complex and difficult in the past, is something that in the spiral continuum is often revisited. Mass awakenings have happened through experiences of war. Personally on the planet, we have seen so many souls go through incredible transitions, unfortunately, at the hands of trauma. But because that awakening didn't result in some physical change in the outer world that was potent enough to move the planet along, it comes back around. What you're experiencing right now is a timeline collision of multiple experiences that have not come to that completion point. So what we've presented may seem quite chaotic, and it certainly is. And we know this is why you're feeling the chaos and inability to understand how to navigate your personal path. But this is the most significant message that we can offer. As complex as it is in the outer world, and as difficult and challenging as it is in your personal experience, there is an intelligent process taking place beneath the surface that is carrying you in the right direction. You can get lost in attempting to validate and invalidate everything going on in the world and in your personal life. You can get lost in attempting to control and ensure that you make the right decisions to lead you into peace and safety and abundance. Or you can sit within the stillness and peace to allow what is brewing beneath the inner surface lead you. And this takes humanity into a different dimension simply because that level of stillness is not something that the mind is used to. The mind is used to being very active. You have run thoughts as intellect and as competition and as education. But you've crossed a threshold now where what can be learned in the outer world is not something you have to strive at. There's a deep inner learning and Akashic record that's being broken open right now within your own DNA. And this may seem negligent, what we are speaking of. To step outside of the realm of a hologram that is imploding and not implicate it directly in physical. But we are assuring you that you will implicate it one way or another. But at the moment, in order to truly serve, you have to be in the realm of where your inner process is guiding you. And so we see a time evolving, especially in the next linear year, where perhaps that separation and the implication of inability to be as physically free as you want is serving a grander purpose. And that purpose may be to come back to center.
A teacher told me once, stand in your love and you can't get it wrong, which seems so simple and cliche and resonated as truth. Can the guides give us practical suggestions on how to do this in a simple way in these times now?
Yes, so we're the Pleiadians, and we're pleased to answer this question because love itself has been defined on your planet as something that is to be strived for and achieved. Often it is put in the light of romanticism, whereby there is something in the outer world that is causing a reflection of love within. But we come today to explain that you are seated in a love-based frequency. It is not an emotion. It is not something that is yet to be ascertained. Love is who you are. It's a state of coherence that many have not been able to achieve because they're attempting to find it first through others. And so we want to explain what love is in relationship to resonance and in relationship to coherence. And in the outer world today, we see so much dissent because everyone is rectifying this true lack of love or inability to find it through others by perpetuating similarity. So what is happening on the planet today, as we see it, is an attempt for everyone to go the same direction, to believe the same things, and to do the same things, take the same actions in order to reassemble a state of unity. Unity itself has been put into a false light, such that if you do not resonate with what every other human on the planet believes is the most important thing to know, do, or believe in, you are outside of that state. But unity could never be found in this way. So to break down love-based frequency, we first have to explain that you're a part of a unified field. And what that unified field is reliant upon is diversity, is an inner part of yourself that was always present, even as a young child, knew the way to its own personal joy and fulfillment, but perhaps somewhere along the way was stalled or blocked in its ability to know that, to remember it, to see it as valid. So we often look at what's taking place on the planet as an attempt of the inner child to truly be heard, where the inner child was so suppressed in its authenticity and need to be seen in its diverse light that it suppressed itself in such great amounts. It must rise up and throw that inner tantrum in the outer world to actually be validated. So we'll start by saying that much of the uproar and the outcry of what you are experiencing that is not in a state of love actually is coming to the surface to find it. And so you may have to be patient for a while all of this is unwound and reconfigured. Yet, to be in a state of love is to recognize not only the diversity within the self, but the diversity of all others. And this means that even if a very large portion of the population is choosing to be the same for the sake of unity, and that is not your idea of love, that you can find the love within yourselves to let them be that diverse. It is somewhat of a surrender state whereby love is not found but realized. There's a subtle difference in that statement. Where love is found, it is efforted at. When it is relaxed into, it is realized. So the seeding of humanity in a love-based frequency to us is the arrival of multiple beings, multiple races from multiple directions actually being in such a high vibrational state of excitement to co-create something that it resulted in you. And it was so honored and revered that to let it evolve without complication was our greatest desire. Because if we were to attempt to move humanity into the evolutionary process that we had followed, it would only negate the beauty of the diversity we had just created. That is how we see love. And this is what you're restoring right now as a sovereign soul connected to a human collective.
I was very pleased to hear that last portion about the tribes, and because I felt that very strongly coming forth. I study plant medicine, and I do work with psychedelics in a traditional sense. And so earlier this year, last year, I started my own sort of channeling on the heels of a plant medicine diet with a particular plant, and it opened up quite a lot. And my question has to do with, because I asked the question to the guides that were these beings that were coming through, I'm like, are you connected to the plants? And is this, like a connection from the plant teachers and all the elementals that I've been studying with for all these years. So is this like a direct line to all these beings that are being channeled, and the all the tribes around the world who are coming together as a one nation to help this like thing happening with humanity? And so I'm just going to leave it at that, because I feel like there's a lot that's going to come through.
So we're pleased that you brought this to our attention, because we think it is a very important message. We're the Arcturian collective, and we also have some of the native grandmothers who are standing ready as well. We want to explain first that what you are explaining to us in your connection to plants and higher consciousness is the pure intention that they were seated within. Multiple generations of intergalactic ancestors were called upon before humans were even seated. And there was a concerted effort to bring our most high vibrational resources, plants, medicines, and elements to Earth. Not because it was important for us to deliberately share them in the form that they had manifested for us, but they became imbued with an intention to serve you. And this is why today, within Gaia herself, the root system of the plants speak to one another, create a matrix, a grid, whereby signals are sent not unlike through your own vibrational channels. And there's a telekinetic understanding of exactly what humanity needs at exactly the time that is perfect for it to bloom and be consumed or interacted with in some very deliberate way. But this is ultimately a macrocosmic example of how your own genetics work. So if we look at the genetics of a plant, especially intergalactic genetics that were hybridized here and evolved into something very unique that Earth herself now supports, we find that within those genetics, there are templates. Templates are patterns, they're programs. They may be defined and understood, and this is why multiple healers on the planet today are communicating directly with elements and plants, because they are healers in their own right. They are intergalactic beings. They have a technology that's built within them, and they have an ability to carry you through this transition. But that is no different than what lies within your own DNA. Your own genetics, the crystalline DNA that you carry, has a similar template, a similar design. And when it's activated and fused and vibrating in such a way that it infiltrates your entire body, your consciousness, your mind, you become one with plants regardless of your ingestion of them, because it is a similar type of signal. It is not unlike the coherence between all humans. But because the lineage that you were seated in and the lineage that the plant and elemental collectives were seated in comes from the cosmos, ultimately you are awakening cosmic family connections through your deliberate interaction with them. And we want to step in as the ancient grandmothers, and they're very pleased to speak as a one voice through this channel to further explain that in many of our ceremonies, we were led to very specific medicines, not because they were the only one that we must choose, but because they had a specific quality and readiness to what our tribe was able to accentuate or utilize as a tool. We would speak to great ancient masters by ingesting these medicines, not because they were guiding us to do certain things, but because we could become one with them. We would activate our cellular energy and our galactic DNA. And this is what the ceremony around the fire is truly about. It's not simply for the purpose of healing or making rain. It's actually a crystalline activation, whereby there could be no delineation between beings, ancient tribes on Earth, and the galactic councils that have been speaking to you in this transmission. So plants are both a resource as well as a family for humans to interact with in this way. But we acknowledge that some of you have a greater relationship. Some of you are intertwined with that plant consciousness and root system through your own roots deliberately, speaking on behalf of them and sharing their vibration through your own. Everyone who is here at this time is not only utilizing plants as a healing tool for themselves, but also have the ability to step into their natural born crystalline state through this connection.
In 1666, the Great Plague of London occurred, and the following year was the Great Fire of London, which destroyed most of London. This resulted in the people fleeing London, and soon after, the government and banks passed certain legal structures that took away the people's power and their land. First, was this plague and the fire naturally caused or orchestrated by government in order to disempower the people? And secondly, in the present time, we have an apparent virus, and California is burning to the ground as well. Are we repeating the same timeline as before? And is this for the purpose of, again, disempowering the people and taking over their land?
This is Pythagoras, and I speak on behalf of a council made of multiple ascended masters and ancient prophets who come back to explain this very complex question and the relationship to past history. And we know it is your desire to validate that there is some influence on the planet that is attempting to skew the relationship between sovereign ownership of property and rights and the capitalization of those who want to steal them from others for their own benefit. And we must acknowledge that on the lower astral planes of the physical experience you're having, this in fact is true. There have always been players who have been utilized as a, we'll say, conduit for acting out certain karmic experiences that are a combination both of past timeline collisions, as have been spoken of and explained previously, as well as co-creative energy, where something in the outer world is magnetizing an experience through the vision and vibration of multiple humans. So if we date back to the event that you are speaking of, we'll note three very significant experiences that were taking place. First, we know that you understand wholeheartedly that there is a presence of a lower vibrational consciousness that has been on the earth for quite some time. And this lower vibrational consciousness has been put into a weakened state whereby their ability to create is reliant upon physical action. And this dates back beyond the event that you're speaking of, but must be considered when you're speaking of it or asking this question. Because to put people in a state of fear is actually a benefit in terms of vibrational currency. When humans themselves are in a state of suppression, fear, or control, they are diminished in their access to intergalactic knowledge, internal truths, and an ability to actually create in the way of peace. And if that state is implicated for a very long period of time, the direction of energy becomes more prominent. So what we believe took place in this one event, which is mimicked through time and in multiple events, is that emotional energy and physical circumstances were implicated in the direction of a way. And that direction was away from the natural born God-given rights and sovereign state of every human on the planet. Now, it is also important to note that currencies at this time were looked at as at a juncture, a pivot point where they were either going to be controlled, we'll say, in a certain way, or in a more suppressive or consolidated way, or widened in their ability to be shared with all. There are some today even that still exist in a genetic lineage that look at energetic currency and physical currency in the same light, where monetary resources, elemental resources such as gold and silver, for example, were not just accumulated for material goods or material wealth, but had an inherent, we'll say, vibrational quality. Certain sigils, for example, were utilized and brought through intergalactics, twisted and variant ways to actually skew the potential for humans to receive the abundance, not only of physical and monetary resource, but energies that supported them. So we do see that many of the physical circumstances that took place at this time had an undercurrent to ensure that this, we'll say, consciousness or smaller divination of humans on the planet were able to capitalize on physical resource. But further, it's important to note that this event that you're speaking of has taken place in many star systems throughout galactic history. And we'll bring back the Orion Wars because we feel they're extremely prominent and very parallel to the experience you're having now, as well as the one that you speak of in the past. These were dimensional wars, and we want to speak to the difference between a physical and a dimensional war. Physical wars on your planet are often fought over physical resource or belief. Often there is physical harm that takes place. And certainly in a dimensional war, physical harm does take place. But dimensional war is a war on currency. It's a war on energy. It's where in order to ascertain knowledge, information, and resource, there is a suppression of energy. There's a distinct plan that's carried out in order to skew timelines in holographic realities. And this is what happened in Orion. So we do see somewhat of a timeline collision or reunion with a cosmic war that was the premise for this to take place. Now, the reason that this is being revisited now is multifaceted, because you've awakened so much of your cosmic selves that it is natural that you will also intersect with cosmic history. This is to your benefit. But in such a suppressive energy that you've already found yourself in, it is natural to match, unfortunately, these cosmic wars and past experiences. But here's the most significant message we will share. We believe that in this moment, the potentials are showing you to reverse this timeline, not to carry it forward for others to have to revisit it again, even though it is showing up in a very similar way as it had before, and there may be a very compact number of humans who are skewing holograms and timelines, stealing currencies and resources. There's a dimensional war that is the most important to consider. And what that means is your vibration is of utmost importance. And we don't believe that in your past earthly history we've ever seen these timelines experienced in this way, where souls such as yourselves have been coming up against physical circumstances with vibrational power. And this is most important to consider. So we give this to you now not as a warning or something that must bring you into a state of fear, because we know that you understand, all of you who are interacting with our message, that there are multiple potentials and human consciousness is driving a very complex experience in this moment. That being said, the amount of awakening that's taken place within a select group of humans has brought you into such a state of universal coherence that many of us who are here today and beyond are supporting you as conduits on the planet are willing. And those conduits will most definitely share a vibration opposite of what these experiences that you speak of are being created as. And beyond their ability to implicate them in physical, will actually intersect with them in such a way that they must be stopped in their tracks. We will leave you with this. Although there will be long-reaching effects of what's being repeated now, those effects do not have to linger as long as what humans decide. So in your minds, as you conceptualize what may take place over the next several years, look beyond linear time to how things have to be healed in certain physical steps and see them as a quantum state. You are currently operating in a quantum realm where all dimensions are accessible. If that is the case, you can choose the path that you are on. And the more who choose the higher path, implicate the one that is lower.
I've been channeling for years, and there's a specific group of beings that I've been writing a book with and have a lot of resistance toward completing the book. So I have a little bit of a question about that resistance and where that's coming from. And then I have sort of a secondary part of the question, which is it important in order for me to share that body of work with the world, is it important for me to share some of my personal history and past, because I have a very unique story that but also is traumatic and difficult for a lot of people to hear. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're Mary Magdalene. We're very pleased to step in. We will start with resistance and want to define it in two lights. Resistance is a message. It's a messaging system that is deep within your soul. And it may be calling you to certain experiences you've had in past incarnations that are similar to the one that you stand within today. And that resistance may not make logical sense to your human mind, because if you've walked this past experience before, it may have been in a different timeline with different humans and different guides. But there's an alert system going off, perhaps to how it may not be received in the same way that your soul intended upon in these past experiences. This is how many of you are implicated right now. The fear that has been the norm for quite some time on this planet and the stepping out of your true identity has made you vulnerable to matching past energies, especially from difficult and challenging timelines that you're coming back to actually repeat. Not in the challenge or the defeat, but to actually see them through in a way that you were not able to do before. And the way to combat this is to actually be very conscious and present in a quantum state with thoughts that arise. What we were taught in the ancient mystery schools was that as fear was arising, the only basis for it could be the unknown, because we would find ourselves within the darkness of a cave or an ancient tunnel, and we would be challenged only with our innate feeling and intuit to guide ourselves to very prominent and potent crystals that were meant for our journey ahead. So to be fearful in the darkness and not know the path was only because there was some unknown or negation of our ability to do so. But if we were present with those thoughts, the questioning of them became the path of release. So resistance is calling you to perhaps a higher notion that the fear that you have is coming from something very abstract and unknown. But if it becomes questioned by you in the moment, it must be released. But also, resistance is a very powerful tool, both in the outer world as well as within the service of a singular soul, Because when resistance is present, it is often an inner GPS that is helping to guide us. Sometimes the resistance is telling us that if we were to tell the story the way our mind believes now, it would not be in the divine perfection our inner plan holds and stalls us along the way. Sometimes resistance is calling us inward so that we evaluate every block we have to our internal truth. But if resistance is seen in this beneficial light, it ceases to hold us back because the perception of resistance is negative. But not unlike the arrow is drawn back with the resistance of the bow in order to find itself catapulted forward. This is often what resistance is doing. It is pulling back the arrow so that we are becoming catapulted forward. So focusing on it too much can actually be the perpetuating factor in its continued arrival. But in terms of your story and in terms of your work, it's important to also bring a message forward for all those who are here. Because whether you are a channel and you are accessing great knowledge from the Akashic records or master teachers, or whether you are here as a healer and you are sending transmissions, or whether you're here to serve simply by being present as a conduit on the planet, that service is of utmost importance. Putting something out in physical is only a small fraction of how you serve. Your own internal process, what your soul goes through in the alchemy of your service and the presentation of it, and the understanding of it, and the uncovering of it, is actually clearing generational patterns that have blocked humanity for decades. So it's important to always acknowledge at every point and every turn how you've already been serving in your willingness to create what you are, in your willingness to trust and believe in the guidance that you're receiving and the ability to stand true in your healing powers. It matters not how many humans you implicate in number. It matters that you are in the process itself. And that is sending out a wave, a ripple, to affect all other humans beyond all knowing. But your story must also be explained, and the importance of a human story, even and especially the ones that are very tragic. And this is why. As Mary Magdalene, there are so many who have come back as conduits of my story in different forms, whether it be through written or spoken word or simply as an ambassador of divine feminine. And as that story is told, even as tragic as sometimes it was, there's a connection that is being made. Because what you experienced has been experienced as a part of the human condition for a very long time on this planet, long before your decision to arrive in a physical body. And this is why you chose it. You may have immersed yourself in the traumatic experience you had, not because you wanted to suffer or because the karma was so important for you to relieve, but because it was so elemental and purposeful in how you would be a channel in the world. So when you're sharing your story, what's taking place is a healing transmission in action. Because even if it is traumatic, and even if it is difficult to be heard or felt, there's a quantum state that you are creating, somewhat like a portal, where all dimensions and all experiences exist, and where those who have had traumas, even small, unrecognizable ones in their lives, are able to access and raise them to the surface. So look at your trauma and look at your story as holding a massive magnet to the trauma and the story of others that have yet to be seen or revealed, and raising it up to the surface so that it can be not only addressed in the mind and in the heart, but felt. And the feeling of it is what is of most importance. So is it important to tell your story? We believe that if your story was this significant, it could be for no other purpose. And as it is shared in conjunction with a higher intention of what you are here to offer, it becomes your service in a quantum way, in action. Now, I want to leave you with this because as we've talked much today about biblical history and biblical stories, and they meeting humans in exactly the right vibration that they hold, there's so many parts of my story that have yet to be revealed. And this is why many masters who are here on the planet will continue to share my story. And not unlike my own, your story goes on and on. What you've experienced here, although you may transition from this body, will continue on elsewhere and be told in higher lights and different dimensions. It is not something that ever ends, even if you have used it as a tool for your own awakening. And so it will continue on with you, and more stories will be told, and more experiences will be had. And many will come to that magnet of your willingness to share, so that they may reveal their own and be upon a path of constant and never-ending change.
Was King Solomon the same being as Zeus? And is the United States seal of the eagle with the snake in its mouth representing an invocation of them? Is the seal a sigil that was originally intentionally created using some sort of magical properties to draw in the power of these beings? And if so, what does a seal draw in?
Okay, we are Hermes, and we're very pleased to step in amongst many others who are supporting this channel and this transmission today. And we'll first allude to your question of Zeus. And we see Zeus as an intergalactic master who both came to the earth in many forms as well as has been present in multiple incarnations on many planets. But we do agree that there is a lineage that exists between the two. In the definition of being, we look at the, we'll say, complex lineage that makes you who you are. And you may see this as the physical parents and lineages that they have brought into your DNA, but it goes far beyond that. In ancient times, the DNA worked quite differently for ancient hybrids and ascended masters upon Earth. We look at King Solomon in this light. Coming to Earth as an intergalactic hybrid that was open to and in acknowledging multiple ascended masters stepping through his energy field because his DNA was configured in this way. This happens today amongst many of you, even in this moment. It is my presence through this channel that is coming through a lineage, a hybridization process, an open and willing portal within this soul's contract to ensure that I am able to appear in whatever fashion I need. And so we see King Solomon as a conduit in this, a representation of this in a very mighty form at a very potent time on the planet. So could there be any delineation between King Solomon and Zeus? We would say they both exist in the same timeline and converged on the planet for a great purpose. Now, that being said, we will break down the understanding in a very simplistic way to help your question in relationship to this image, which we actually see as both a sigil as well as a representation of multiple beings at the time who were prominently involved in ensuring that humanity was able to live in a free and sovereign state. Although this sigil and many others through time have been implicated through intention, and we'll explain that momentarily, these original images are a part of a doctrine. A doctrine of truths, not unlike the native symbols that you see expressed in ancient books, or the hieroglyphs that are strung together on pyramid walls. These are creating a vibration. As they come together, they are signifying not only, we'll say, the highest aspect of godlike truth that can be ascertained in a physical body, but also a free and sovereign state that all humans exist within. Together, these symbols, when combined, are meant to express that in a way that is, we'll say, not encumbered by any one human or being's ability to suppress it. But sigils through time, designs, intergalactic designs, have actually been infiltrated and often changed through their intention. And this is important to note because you may even see symbols, portions of this greater design in different areas of your physical life where they may have been separated or brought back together in a different way, or they may have been preyed upon or infiltrated in such a way that they represent something quite different. We see on your planet a very grand effort, especially on behalf of multiple collectives, to hide the power and the potency of these various symbols, or to use them as a tool for their own gain. So as we've brought this definition forward, we caution you to note that that symbol itself, although it was originally formed in the highest vibration and countenance that it could, through time has actually been infiltrated and hidden and may have been utilized in ways that isn't the highest power of humanity. But it is interesting to us that you asked the question, because we think the timing is right for humanity to uncover these truths and reinstill them, to purify them, to bring them back into their original form. And this is dating back to the time of King Solomon, where many of the timelines he experienced are also coming back in mass and being right now experienced by humans in multiple ways. King Solomon is an entity that we have much appreciation for because he continues to express all that he was here on the earth to accomplish in other timelines and dimensions. Many of you have a connection to him yourselves, not because you must speak on behalf of him directly, but because the lineage and the connection that he held to the Akashic records is so mighty and massive that it's a part of your divine blueprint to achieve in this lifetime. And he himself offers guidance from the ethers, where he remains with many of us to support your experiences today.
In India and other Hindu temples around the world, there are structures referred to as lingas. Many buildings around the world, such as government buildings, have a similar shape. Nowadays, people perform rituals by pouring milk or water over the top of these lingas. But what was the original purpose of these structures, and how do the current rituals that are performed evolve?
We see these, this is Krishna actually, we see these as technology. When we look at an ancient linga, we're dating back to ancient civilizations where energy was cultivated for the purpose of accentuating consciousness. And this was their original purpose. If we look at, for example, ancient civilizations similar to Atlantis, we note that ancient beings would arrive with specific protocols and practices combined with certain elements and arrangements to ensure that consciousness was upheld, integrity and purity was upheld. But not unlike the previous question, many of these technologies today have been infiltrated and implicated. We look at life force as being imbued within the intention of this original design. Many of you equate life force to what exists within your bodies, and you certainly are powerhouses of generating your own life force. But life force is present universally. It is something that you tap into with the breath. And if life force is constantly regenerated and expanded upon and purified, perfect creation takes place. Because life force is the universal presence. It is the all that is. It is the beingness, the consciousness that saw itself as so expansive that it wanted to duplicate and replicate in different forms to better understand who it was. And the ancient Linga is a representation of this, whereby some are utilizing very similar creative and physical tools to human replication to imbue and honor it with a certain intention. And it would be difficult for us to fully answer this question without differentiating between life force and sexual energy as it has been defined on your planet, because this is where we see some of the infiltration and the lowering of vibration of it taking place. In the lower astral realms of a human body, the ability to generate life force for creation exists. This is because it is where you anchor to the earth, where your root system plugs in to something very solid and physical. And the energetic part of you loves that. The energetic part of you wants to bring this life force in and raise it through your entire structure, not only to have physical creative endeavors that take place, but to manifest through source energy to your highest good. There is a Kundalini aspect of this that many of us would practice in ancient civilizations, where the generation of life force would result in the activation of Kundalini. This was ultimately, when done in mass with groups of humans, a creative endeavor where intentions were pure. And what would result would be in the highest and best interest of all involved. But sexual energy and Kundalini has been put in a very low astral light. And there are beings on the planet who have diminished the definition of what Kundalini and sexual energy are truly meant to do. So we see some of these practices as stemming from stepping into more of a linear state, where these lingas or technologies are looked at as an ability to ascertain and utilize them, or to ascertain resources or utilize them as a tool for competition, when they were never meant to work in this way. But the most beautiful message we can bring through about the Linga is it may actually show a representation of what happens as Kundalini is taking place within the body, where there's an ancient spiral and vibration that connects the as above and the so below in complete coherence and beauty to your own unique timeline, because there are things you decided on before coming. And those things for you are your highest state of abundance. So it's important to infuse this with an additional message, and then we'll get back to the technology. You have been taught that what you receive is not what you want, because there's a standard outside of you that is always driving your completion. This could never be so, because everything that you are meant to receive already exists in the universe and is perfectly timed and orchestrated with what you decided on before coming. And Kundalini accentuates this. It puts you in a state where the physical world and the way that your inner divine plan is sourcing for you become a powerhouse of exploration and co-creation, whereby everything that you receive is expanding your experience in the outer world. But imagine if that was stolen from you. If put into a lower astral state, or even focused on sexual energy, there was an end point to this incredible ability to expand. This is what we see has happened in the expression of life force. So in a sense, we believe that this Linga is a true expression of how life force can be ascertained and how creative endeavors can take place. It's an aspect of your inner technology that, when focused on in the outer world in a pure state, can help you regain and rebalance that within yourself.
Did King Solomon have the Ark of the Covenant in his possession? Many believe that the Ark was the chalice of Jesus, but when other depictions show it as some sort of a technology that was shaped like a box. Supposedly Moses used it to part the sea, But what was it exactly? And was it moved to Ethiopia after his lifetime? And is it still being guarded in a church there? And if so, is the reason why this is being kept, what is the reason why this is being kept from humanity? Will it ever become available for public use and view?
Yes, so we're actually bringing in Abraham. Abraham is a representative of a collective council that is here to speak on the Ark of the Covenant and explain its true meaning. What we see the Ark of the Covenant as is not a physical technology, so much as it is a variety of different symbols and galactic archetypes that were shown to us in the astral that we would replicate and utilize to accentuate our ability to accomplish great feats on the planet. So if you were to open this Ark of the Covenant today, many would ponder what would be inside. And what we understand is that what was created in that timeline as a physical replica of what we were taught could never appear on the earth today. What you believe is that there are ancient books and scrolls and teachings that are hidden beneath the earth in a physical form that you are yet to uncover. And what we see is that you're existing in a hologram where you're vibrationally matching the components of history that are most necessary for you to understand, to evolve yourself. Now, you may believe that the inability to access what took place in that period is not serving you. But what we see is the state of consciousness that the collective is in could never bring these designs back, because your readiness to utilize them in a pure state for all, which was the way in which we were taught to use them, does not currently exist. And we say this with a full state of love in our hearts for your constant evolution as souls and complete lack of judgment as to where you stand today. We're only explaining to you from a physical linear standpoint what you're attempting to accomplish with this question. The parting of the sea. This was not a physical teaching, but a vibrational alignment that was achieved through multiple incantations and interactions with light beings that showed us the way to create grids, the way to move and alchemize elements. Even the pyramids on your planet that took shape and form that many of you question today, looking at them as great feats that could never be accomplished with human hands, came into being through these teachings. So the Ark of the Covenant does still exist. The ancient box that you speak of, although it holds a very high vibrational quality because of what its contents and possession were, is not as valuable today as it was back then. So we don't see the hiding of it as being something that's done purposely so much as it is a result of the human collective's readiness and consciousness to receive it. So its undisclosed location and its movement between locations is something that we don't necessarily feel that is important to pinpoint. Not because it is not our desire to fully answer your question, but because we see right now the variations in speed and the instabilities within the earth that are causing holograms to shift. And in the same way we explain this location of a group of tools to you as not being physical, the box itself is not physical either. Where it stands today may be completely different geographically than where it stands tomorrow, because you are jumping timelines this quickly. And it's important to know that as you continue forward, especially over the next linear year, there is a push-pull type of vibration that we see going on, especially with your ability to ascertain and hold the consciousness to utilize these tools. We see fragments of them coming back. We see teachings of them coming back, but not in their fullest state. Maybe some will be conduits for the full practice that we knew as ancient masters and ascended teachers walking the earth, but it could never be explained in the same light and be relevant to you today as it was to us back then. Because if you were to part the sea today, how many humans on the planet exist who could fully acknowledge it even if it happened before their own eyes? This is the problem most that we see, is that the magic and the ability to create these states of perfect and divine harmony were trusted within, seen and known, and taken as validation that they were true. So the invalidation of what's happening at the higher levels of consciousness is not a match to you being able to utilize these tools. But your question about King Solomon is something that we must validate and agree that there have been a variety of us who have worked in alignment with him in different ways, in different assignments, to keep these symbols safe, to replicate and utilize them as powerful tools, especially at a similar time to where you stand today, to ensure that the path was cleared like the sea was parted, so that the work that he was here to do could be done with no roadblocks and no implications. And we see this possible today as well. It need not be with the rite of the arks of the Ark of the Covenant or all of the technologies that were present within them. They're all within you to ascertain, find, and activate and utilize as a tool for your own navigation.
It's believed that King Solomon mined a substantial amount of gold, and that's now in the hands of many governments. It's also believed that he also had 1,000 wives, but he's regarded as having been a very wise and enlightened being, so what did he want with gold and 1,000 wives?
Yes. We are the consciousness of King Solomon, and not unlike the biblical stories that have been passed on for generations and changed time and time again, my story has also done the same. As an intergalactic being, I came to ensure that everything that had been installed within and upon the earth would be restored to its original state of purity. I was shown in holographic models the way the earth was changing and the potentials for those on the planet at this time to take these resources and utilize them for their own benefit. And at a time when the value of gold itself was not fully understood, I was taught on intergalactic ships and in intergalactic lifetimes how to utilize it as a tool for longevity. Not because it was important to live a certain number of linear years, as many of you are wishing to do on the planet today, but because the amount of life force generated in one linear expression is the most important reason that you come. In order to experience and create is your biggest service to humanity. And there are elements and properties of the earth, such as gold, that are finely attuned to your resonance, that actually support your constant ability to be in a state of access. For me, gold was utilized as a tool to open the doors of the Akashic records and universal knowledge that I could bring to the planet at this time. I was most recognized for this as a soul on earth, where what I knew and what I taught was surprising to many of those in existence. And it was not the intellect and the studying that was done by me as a human that allowed this to take place, but my constant initiation with intergalactics and elements that supported this path. So gold itself was accumulated as a valuable resource, not in a monetary sense, but to use in construction, to adorn and to infuse in gathering spaces and temples. It was utilized in ancient vaults as group meditations between myself and many others who were in power at that time would focus and ensure that the outer world would reflect our inner ideas and intentions. But the divine feminine is something that comes along with this. In the stories that are shared of me, there were many female energies that would come to be a part of my path. And this had less to do with personal endeavors and intimate connections, and more to do with the state of masculine that I was in, a compassionate and conscious state of physical realignment that required the feminine in mass to support it. So in the same rite, multiple incantations, meditations, and affirmations were done with the divine feminine by my side as a conduit supporting my endeavors, not unlike the Master Jesus walking the earth with many ascended masters of the female gender. It wasn't their gender that was most important. It was the energy they held and the conduit and connection that they were able to ascertain that was the most powerful. And so I see myself as a conduit amidst many, anchoring a masculine physical energy complemented by feminine at a time when it was most needed to ensure that the constant immaculate conception of the soul was possible in the highest state of life force that could be ascertained, to have experience and to share that life force with all.
So if we were to use gold today in the same way that he used it back then, what's the best way? Should we consume it in like a nanoparticle gold, or should we wear it? Should we adorn our homes with it? What would you say?
Actually, this is Isis. I welcome her. And she says it is not unusual for those in my timeline to have ingested the properties of gold. It was broken down and ingested as very minute particles, and sometimes it was mixed with an elixir of adorned waters so that it could be utilized as a tool to create coherence with the intergalactic councils and realms. This was something that would move our body into a higher state of knowing. The body itself is not looked at in this way. Many of you who consider ingesting the property of gold are looking at it as an opportunity to bring yourselves into a perfect state of health, when in fact, the health is a side benefit of what is actually happening within. Gold is an alchemical property, and it exists within your own bodies, not in a gold atomic state, but as a frequency. So what you are doing when you are ingesting gold is you are matching frequencies, universal frequencies that completely change your entire energetic structure. That being said, this is why we also were adorned with great jewels containing gold properties and other elements. We were taught to configure these in ways that were perfect for our own blueprint and design. Many look at the ornate jewels in the time of ancient Egypt as simply beautiful, and we see them as technologies. We were speaking to these elements and crystals, and we were configuring them perfectly to accentuate the properties of our own soul, to actually carry us into our divine plan and assignment in a way that would bring ease and abundance into our lives. So in today's modern world, what we see is the ingestion of gold is far more powerful than the adorning of it in jewels, and this is why. The idea of gold as a property on your planet is now imbued with a specific imprint. It has been looked at in a material sense, and it has been looked at in a way of wealth. And this is not conducive to how gold itself as a property was utilized by many of us. If you are to deliberately work with the element of gold, utilizing it as a tool combined with your channeled ability or your healing ability to change its imprint, it can have the same quality as what I was using it for physically in my timeline. But the ingestion of it is a very immediate alchemy that is possible, because in the ingestion of gold, there's no imbued imprint of its in value or worth, that it has to be shown or received in a certain way, because the body takes it and knows exactly what to do with it. So we advise this, that if you desire to work with gold in your personal life, that in order to do it in physical, you should re-imprint it and focus on it with your energy to imbue its purity. But to ingest it is most beneficial.
Is there any advantage to also ingesting silver with the gold, or is it not that important? Or does this silver serve a different purpose?
We see silver as holding a different quality and a different purpose, while at the same time perfectly complementing that of gold. Silver to us is actually seen a bit different than gold, and if we were to rank them, which we are hesitant to do, we would put gold at the upper threshold of what is needed right now on your planet. Because silver itself, although it has a very physical and microbiological property and effect, has not been seen in the light that it was in our timeline. For us, it was used as a grounding property. And this is how we see silver. Quite different than the presence of gold in the body, where it's taking a human back into its coherent universal state. Silver has a tendency to connect with the elements of earth. And this is very important at this time because we know many of you have fallen out of harmony with earth. And utilizing silver as a tool can bring that harmony back into the consciousness and the cells of the body. Silver for us is also a valuable property to reconfigure the throat chakra. We see the throat as carrying a lot of discordant energies and frequencies through time. And as a property utilized around the neck, for example, it can pull out these various tones and sounds that exist that are inauthentic to the human soul. This was not how it was utilized by us. We were utilizing it actually more in building and construction, especially as a stabilizing point for various gathering spaces and temples. However, we do see it very beneficial and important for humanity at this time to ingest with gold, because it will both accentuate higher consciousness as well as bring the body into that state on the earth plane.
Could you conclude the session, please?
Yes. So many of us who are here stand with you in a circle of light, embracing you now for your willingness to share with us as we have shared with you. We always acknowledge that we are not separate, we are one, and it is our highest honor to always come forward and show you more of who you are. Many blessings. Thank you. Any final questions, thoughts, things that, yeah.
When there was speaking of ingesting gold and silver, is there any need to balance the possibility of heavy metal buildup in the body physically?
No, this is what the guides are saying. Actually, this is the Arcturians. We have to look always at the purity and the property of the metallics that we're putting in our bodies. And their history on the planet is what is most important. So many of the metals that we see as toxifying the body are inorganic in nature. Gold and silver are organic properties that were seated here in a pure state. And because of that, they put back into your body, or we'll say they influence in your body, the elements that are the most pure as well. Does that make sense? Okay, you're welcome. Anyone else? All right, thank you guys. We're going to take a short break. We left a lot of space today because we felt like social, so important. So take good use of that. There's lots of snacks out there, tea, coffee. Thank you.